Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Motor Age TST webinar. As always, I'm Pete Meyer, Motor Age Magazine, accompanied by my good friend,
G. Trulia from TST. And behind the scenes, we got Vice President Pierre Rispo at the computer there, and lovely Doreen behind the camera. Now, if I didn't say that, I'd be in trouble, so we have to make sure I do that.
We appreciate you coming out tonight for tonight's webcast. If you've been with us before, you kind of know a little bit about our format, but if you haven't, let me give you a few bits of information that you'll need as we go through tonight's topic, the top 10 DTCs, what to do when they show up in your shop.
And they will.
Of course, we got to give kudos to our sponsor tonight.
SnapOn.
Great folks at SnapOn are picking up the tab so that we can bring this to everyone at no cost. So thank you, SnapOn guy, when you see him on the truck.
Yep. Buy some SnapOn tools.
Yeah. He may not be sure what you're talking about, but the SnapOn execs do. And if they're watching, welcome. We hope that we live up to expectations.
And my SnapOn rep was nice enough if we needed something to say he would come over.
Yes.
Spoke to us today. So John
Above and
Curcio,
beyond. Above and
great
beyond.
job. Thank you.
Here's one of the topics that we're going to cover. First, what are the top 10 DTCs? And what are the top 10 DTC-related repairs? That'll be interesting to look at.
To say the least.
What do they share in common? We're going to talk a little bit about silver bullets. Might be great for the Lone Ranger and Tonto, but
right. But silver bullets can lead you into some problems. You know, when people think, well, the last one I worked on was like this, Pete, so I'm just going to do that. Well, that can be an issue.
It sure can.
But we're going to show you some neat stuff from SnapOn that'll keep you and steer you in the right course.
Absolutely. What are the first steps you should take to ensure a successful repair? And we'll give you some tips on diagnosing these common concerns that you can put to work back in your shop. Finally, using a repeatable diagnostic process, and we'll actually do that on a live car here in G's shop up here in New York, 40 miles from ground zero. Started looking at it, so we'll see what kind of a process we can use, and maybe we'll do a favor for the tech that comes back in Monday, and we'll have the thing already formed to just fix, right?
That's it.
We'll see.
Franklin will have an easier job.
Few things to take care of. So before we dive into things, first, if you're watching, you may notice that at the underneath the player, if you can't see the chat window completely, you'll likely see these three little dots at the bottom of the player. Click on those dots. It's going to open up a menu. You want to choose pop out. When you do that, it's going to set the window off separately. And then you're going to have two options in that chat window. The chat window, that's for all you watching. Interact with each other, share your comments, shared experiences, whatever you want to use it for. But there's also going to be a selection, should be a selection for Q&A, question and answer. If you have a question for us, type it into that section of the chat box. That'll show up on our end, and as you may have seen earlier, we can then share that with everyone else as we try to provide that answer. Now, we're gonna tell you right up front, we certainly don't know everything. We don't, and we're not going to try to bluff our way through anything we don't know. As always, we're going to tell you what we know, and if we don't know it, we're going to tell you that too. But we'll find the answer for you.
You bet. Now, we may want to try the chat box right now and say hi to us, just for the hay of it, so we can see it pop up. So why don't you try the Q&A box and see if it pops up? And again, thank you for attending. So let's see if we see anything.
Did you have something there, Pierre? Okay, good. If you're all in chat, that's working. All right, way to go.
Good. All right.
All right. The next thing I want to point out is, if you haven't noticed, above the player, there is a handout link so that you can download the handout for tonight. Someone's already indicated there may be an issue with that link. I'm not sure if that's on their end or we have something wrong on our end. If it is on our end, we'll share some contact information with you near the end of the webcast that you can reach out to us. We'll be glad to get that to you. In the meantime, you might want to make a note of the slide that we're on, take some notes on a piece of paper and pencil, so you can add those to your handout, later on. And finally, when it's all said and done, you'll be able to click and download a certificate of completion. So if you're an educator and you need those credit hours, these will qualify for that. So make sure you download that when you're done. You'll see that on your list of all the classes that you have. And even if you just want one to post at work or share with your boss that you took the training, absolutely, let them know.
No problem.
All right. Here's some notes to make of. Here's our email addresses for both myself and G-Man. We'll leave that up for just a second so that you can write that down. And again,
you can switch to number 2 on that so to get a good view.
Yeah. And Noreen can stay backed out, save herself. She's like so into the habit of like zooming in and out.
All right.
All
so
right.
you should have had that by now.
All right. So let's dive in. What are the top 10 DTCs? I'm going to tell you right now, I took a lot of research on this as I got into this subject, and there are a number of DTCs out there. Back to number 1 there, Pierre. He's staring intently at his Q&A screen. There we go. New technology, folks, so we're all kind of getting in the use of it. That's the beauty of doing things live.
Yep.
So when we were looking up this information, there are a lot of different resources on the internet for these statistics, and I found that there were many that were shared in common systems. So you're going to see that I've kind of grouped these up. I want to give you a feel for what are the most common things that you're telling the industry that you're seeing the most of.
Right. And a lot of these come from, if you're in a state emission program, 28 emission states in the U.S., they have the top 10. And I'm going to tell you that this is the number 1 in the U.S. and in Canada.
Yep.
P0, 420, 430.
Number 1, catalyst system, low efficiency codes.
Yep.
Next most common?
The lean. And
fuel system lean, trim codes.
Now, you may want to add something there. If you're on a Ford, you're going to get a different number than the 171. You're going to get a P2, 036 and 38. Wrote an article in Motor Age about that. And that seems to be a common one out there as well.
Mm-hmm. So if we could put number 2 up on the screen there, Pierre, or here we go, so we can track those down. Number 3 on the list, PO300, but it was all the misfire codes were in some place in that top grouping of codes.
Right. And there's where a misfire, Pete, everyone thinks a misfire, probably if we took a poll, the number 1 thing they think for misfire is spark.
Yeah.
But it could be a lot more than that, right? It could be fuel, it could be mechanical, it could be EGR related, or nowadays VVT related.
Absolutely. So number 4.
The dreaded evap
leaks. Evap leaks.
That'll do you in.
Next on the list, PO128. Thermostat.
Now, thermostats, Pete, it could be sometimes the part. You got to be careful with thermostats. Could be even the antifreeze coolant mixture, because we see them a lot here, and that you definitely want to check out. That is a big one.
Next one, other way on the trim. System rich.
So you got the leaks, too much fuel, right? Or too little air. And that could be, and let's not forget another good article in Motor Age, the E85 syndrome. So right there, always check for alcohol in the fuel.
Next one, PO401 EGR flow problems.
So Pete, we just don't change the valve?
No.
It's EGR, got to change the valve. Flow insufficient is a biggie. That is a biggie.
Now, let's take a look at the top 10 repairs. And we're just going to go through this list real quick, and then we're going to go back and take another look at them individually. So right up the top 10, let's take a look. Number 1, replace catalytic converter with OE. Number 2, replace oxygen sensor. Number 3, replace ignition coils and spark plugs.
That's a big.
Number 4, replace the mass airflow sensor. Number 5, inspect for loose fuel cap. Tighten or replace as necessary.
Now, the parts store was getting very sad there. You had a great thing there with everything they're making money on, and now you're just going to tighten stuff. Wow.
Yep. Well, replace ignition coils. Number 6 on the list. Number 7, replace the evap purge valve, the vent valve. Number 8, replace fuel injectors. Number 9, replace the thermostat. And finally, number 10, replace the evap purge control valve. Now, this is the interesting question. And we can go back to number 1 for a bit there. Thank you. Did any of that stuff fix the car?
Well, maybe.
Maybe. And I want to say here that these databases and this is one of the topics that I really want to get across tonight. There are numerous sources of repair databases. We've talked about many of them before. IATN maintained a huge database, probably still do. Identifix, our sponsor, SnapOn,
Mitchell.
and Mitchell One.
Yeah, Mitchell
One. And every hand tool or scan tool manufacturer on the planet now is trying to do the same thing. They're building these databases of information. Some of them, like the SnapOn database, has a lot of verified fixes, which helps with that, but many others don't. And what we're concerned about when we get to these databases is, are you just starting at the top of the list and working your way down?
And are you just going by part sales, because that's how they made a lot of those lists.
Right. So let's take a look at some in particular. Like number one, replace the catalytic converter with OE. That's got to be related to the 420, 430 codes.
No doubt. And what we find here in our shop is a lot of the cats don't need to be replaced. If the substrate is broken, meaning you hear a rattle or whatever it can be, then yes, if there's damage. A lot of times it is just dirty. And the number one thing we see is actually the number two. If people get a 420, they're putting in new O2s or air fuels. What are you going to do? It's going to be worse. You're actually getting a better reading from a new sensor. That's not the problem. You got to diagnose it.
Right.
You know, the big thing with our sponsor, it gives them a way to look at what the issue is and then go right into Mitchell, okay, right from the tool. And when you're going into service information, Pete, I always say RTFI, read the freaking information, because that's what you really need to do. Not be a parts changer.
Yeah.
Because this may or may not fix the car.
Right.
You may be lucky today,
right,
unlucky tomorrow.
And it was a great, interesting comment that you made with a lot of times it's the oxygen sensor that's causing this problem, whether it's upstream or downstream. So maybe they tried the first one, it didn't work, and went to number two. Especially
if they dropped it on the floor. What's it going to work to?
Yeah. The next one got me. Replace ignition coils and spark plugs. That's because you just said it. One of the first thing that many technicians think about when it comes to misfire, they think of that fire portion, right? Ignition. Let's throw some plugs in it. Let's throw some coils at it and see what happens. The one that absolutely tickled me the most is when I saw this one. The number 5 most common repair reported in this particular survey was inspect for a loose fuel cap, tighten or replace as necessary. I just have an envision in my mind of a evap code stored in the ECM. Yep. And the first thing the guy does is go see if the cap's on tight. Maybe he clicks it a few times, doesn't really know whether it was on loose or not, doesn't know whether it's leaking or not, but okay, that's it. Let's turn the light off and see what happens. And you and I both know that most evap monitors will take quite a while to come back on again, right? So it could be quite a while before that light turns back on again.
And we have, just saying this right here, there are a couple of manufacturers, more than a couple. Ford Motor Company put the gas cap light on it. So did Chrysler, puts it right in the odometer.
Yeah.
Telling you it's the gas cap, because what were people doing? Oh, you need a purge solenoid. You need a vent solenoid. You really have to diagnose the system.
And there's DTCs for that.
And there's DTCs
for it. For gas cap.
Yep.
This we talked about before, man. This guy might have used the silver bullets.
Kimosabi.
But are they silver bullets, or is it just lazy diagnostics? And what we're trying to say here, folks, these databases can be valuable resources, but that's what they are. They're resources. They are not the answer. I mean, and here's the trick. It's like back in the day, man, when we were first, you and I was first starting out, there was no internet. If you had a problem vehicle, you knew the guys in the shops around town. You would get on the phone, you'd call, hey, have you ever seen this and had this kind of a problem? And we would share information to see what these common issues might be with the cars we worked on back in the day.
Networking, or you would go to a class or a seminar and talk to people and say, hey, you work on this car, like, Peter was Mr. BMW. Hey, I got a BMW. Did you ever see this before?
Right.
That's called networking. Now it's all done on the internet.
Right. But the thing back in the day was you knew your source.
Oh, yeah.
You knew if that guy was a decent tech or he was not so decent.
Well, then you wouldn't ask him.
Right. now we have, as you pointed out, with the internet and YouTube and all of these others and all the databases collected by a variety of manufacturers, suppliers, aftermarket companies, even the OEs are collecting this data as a resource. There's so much information out there. You still have to kind of wade through it to see what's good and what's not, right?
And that brings up that point. So there are great YouTube channels out there, you know, and there are some that are not so great. It doesn't matter how many views these people have.
Right.
It's really, is that content real? Some people that are on the internet, like everything in life, are just doing that particular channel for views. And they may have procedures that are totally wrong. And you could be stuck with changing something. And always think of it, I always say to people, if that's your mother's car, are you going to change that?
Yeah.
We got to test, that old son saying, test, not guess, right? And then Pierre has a better saying that you're going to come up with later. But people would just change stuff. You really got to test it. Does it work? Do you know how to test it? But people become code dependent. They see a code? Oh, no. You remember when the first GMs came out? OBD, 1980? You had a code for an oxygen sensor. Guess what they told you to put in the car? An oxygen sensor. Then when it didn't fix it, you went, oh, these stupid systems. I don't know what they're doing. You have to test the system in the circuit.
Right.
That's what we
and
need
this
to do.
leads us perfectly right to what we were going to say, because all of these data resources shared one thing in common. I'm just going to paraphrase the one so you know what they're all telling us, and that's this. Use the database to generate a report with the most likely fix based on a pattern failure. All right, I'm good with that so far.
You bet.
But here's the part that's being forgotten generally. A qualified automotive technician then uses this data, confirms the necessary repairs, and changes the defective component.
Oh, hold it, Pete. Hold it, Pete. Hold on. Hold on. So you're saying when I go to that store, you know, that they read the code with the code reader, and they come out and tell me, well, you need a mass airflow sensor or whatever, and I change 2 parts and it don't work, okay, then I just go down the list? Or do I really need to go to this guy here?
Right, absolutely.
And I think I really need to go to
absolutely,
that guy.
because what they tell you about the electronic parts you buy, no returns,
no return,
no refunds.
No refund. You're messed.
If an underinformed mechanic or do-it-yourselfer tries to diagnose a check engine light, it is possible that many parts will be changed and wasted trying to fix the problem.
You know, Pete, true story. You know, down the road, I'm not going to mention the parts store, but they're right down the road. So they go there and they get this list. Oh, the code reader said you need the mass air. You need this. You need that. Then they come in here and we tell them it's going to cost them blank amount of money to diagnose it. I don't want diagnosed. In fact, not this Friday. Friday before, the customer comes in, true story, says, I want the right front wheel speed sensor. We go, well, we should diagnose it. Nope, just put it in. Now, it's near the end of the night because they were told somewhere, okay, we put it in, not the problem. Now, we were nice enough to throw actually a SnapOn scan tool on it for real and actually say, hey, it's the right rear. Maybe you misunderstood the guy or whatever. They were all hell-bent.
Yeah.
Oh, but you put the part in. Go, whoa, whoa. In New York State, you got to sign the paper. You came in saying you did not want a diagnosis. You wanted us to change your part. We did exactly what you wanted.
Right.
That's the danger out there.
Right.
So don't make that mistake just because something tells you to do it. Check it out.
Now, I'm going to say, too, that everyone who's watching with us tonight, we know we're talking to the choir. Because you're the men and women who understand that this is not a static business. It's changing constantly, and that you have to keep up with those changes if you're going to stay relevant, if you're going to be able to make money and make these repairs and perform these diagnostics. What I'm hoping is that there are many of you on here tonight, maybe for the first time, and you've never had the chance to spend the time with G and myself or attend some type of training like this. And you're the folks that I really want to talk to. I understand the shop environment. The boss is on your neck about getting that car fixed and out. The customer's breathing down their neck to get their car back. So what are you going to do? You're going to try to find the most quickest way, I should say, to find the problem and get that car on the road. And what's the easiest way to do that? Well, let's take a look in Google. Let's take a look at any of these other information sources and start working our way down the list until we quit. Either we fix the problem or the customer just doesn't come back. Okay. And that's
one way to fix it.
is, and let's be real with each other. There are 750,000 men and women fixing cars in this country. That's a lot of people. And we all know that there are many of them who are using exactly this process to do their diagnostics. In fact, G was sharing a story with me where another company locally had done a lot of parts changes on a customer's vehicle, didn't fix the car. They finally came to this guy to get the solution. But the reality was the other shop put more money in the bank than he got to for his diagnostics.
That happens quite a bit.
Right. But the other side of the coin is that customer is now his customer.
You bet. They come back here.
Yep. All right.
And that happens.
And just like he said, I love this when Pierre told me about this. We've heard us say test, don't guess, but I love this. Test the guess. If you're looking at this data and you see the number one cause, don't just automatically assume that your car has the same or your customer has the same problem. Test that guess. And if it's verified, then you can go ahead and make that repair.
Exactly.
And we're going to show you, instead of having to try to be fast by starting at the list and working your way down, we're going to show you how to be more efficient by following a process.
Process, like in anything, Pete, is really what needs to be done.
Yep.
You know, it's just like I always say, that game plan. You need the plan. And if you don't know a system, let's all face it, a new vehicle comes in, the hell do I know about this new vehicle? That's where you can go into Pro Demand, read it, and go, oh, that's what that does. Then look at information. Plan it out before you go to the toolbox and start ripping stuff apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what I want you to do? Be a detective. Take a look, because my wife and I, we got into this binging, right, with the streaming television.
Got Humphrey over there.
Yeah. So first we're watching
Where's Columbo
SVU,
when I need him?
And then we started watching Criminal Minds. They want to
Criminal Minds.
Really good. And one of the things that you learn is you start thinking like they do. What are you going to do first? Everybody is suspect. When you have a problem with a car, like the one we're going to show you in a little bit, starting off, everybody is suspect. Every part of the car is suspect.
You bet.
And here's what I don't want you to do. Common mistake. Maybe you said, well, I know for sure that it can't be X, so I'm not going to even worry about that. Just put it totally out of my mind. But you didn't verify that. You didn't confirm that. You just kind of assumed that.
It's a new part, Pete. How could it be bad?
Or maybe it's a system you think is not related. Could be the problem. But don't assume that. At the beginning, you got to keep everything as suspect.
You bet.
Next thing you do, you start eliminating them by group. You're going to do your homework, right? What's the first thing these CSI guys do or the Criminal Minds guys show up in town? The first thing they do, where do they go? They go to the crime scene, right? They poke around the crime scene. They're getting all the information they can. They look at everything that's going on. And then they start investigating the person that's the victim. And they learn everything they can about the victim, what they did, what they liked, who they hang out with, the whole 9 yards. It's no different than when you're working on a car. You want to know everything you can about the system that's affected. Like G said, you go to your service information, you go to Pro Demand, you look up that theory of operation, how that works, how that component works, how that system works, how it interfaces with the other systems on the car. Everything you can learn about that. And I'm going to stress here too, guys and gals, today, close enough is not good enough. Today's vehicles, high technology, highly complicated, designed to work in a very narrow range. You have to be spot on with your repairs, okay?
No doubt.
So you got to do your homework. When we're going to look at a DTC, we want to know, why did the ECM set that DTC? What tests did it make? What did it see that it didn't like? What other tests are not going to be performed as long as that one's showing up bad? Everything you can do to learn about that system. Just because you worked on, as we're going to see later, a Honda that you worked on maybe yesterday and it was a 2009 model, doesn't mean it's going to be the same as the 2012 I got sitting in the bay today. It changes from manufacturer to manufacturer. It changes from model year to model year. So you got to do your homework, number one. And then take a test, make a test, do something that will help you eliminate as many possible causes as you can.
And if you know how to test each component in that system, then you could eliminate what the problem is.
Absolutely. Because once we've got it narrowed down to a few, then we start doing what our friend Jim Morton likes to call the general and the pinpoint test. This is when you start getting into those specific items. Maybe you got 4 or 5 suspects that you think might be causing the problem. Then you can go in and start doing those specific tests for that component and isolate until you get to that one.
You bet.
Right? And then when you get to the one.
Question?
I had a comment. I wanted to add my own comment.
Comment from Mr. Pierre.
One of my pet peeves is the unavailability of strategies from car manufacturers. So I think I'd like to encourage people to ask the manufacturers for their strategies. We get caught on those all the time. Unpublished strategies.
So Pierre was saying, in case you couldn't hear him clear enough, strategies of a vehicle, if we knew what the strategies were, you'd definitely be able to fix it. Now, one thing I always like saying, I call it the Automotive Bible, is the Bosch Automotive Handbook that you can get from SAE.org. It's a little bit of a tough read, but there's phenomenal information in there because it is strategies on certain systems. Not exactly a strategy for each manufacturer, but it's a basic strategy.
Right.
And if we did have the strategy of how, let's say, Mercedes or Ford or Toyota is testing something or how they put that light on, that is called code setting criteria.
Yeah.
Super important. And most of the time you can get that info in ProDemand.
Right.
That does make sense.
And I was going to put, it's good if you buy that book from SAE because you support SAE in the process, but you can get it from Amazon.
Oh. Come on. Doesn't he have enough money?
Question here.
All right. Question. Well, we got Mr. Spock on the screen. Yes. Throw her up there.
Can you pop that question up there, Pierre? Or?
Oh, yeah.
No, that's the screen man. You can get rid of that dude. No, no, we don't see the question.
How do you verify a part that you cannot test, like a TCM?
Ah, now that's a good one.
We're going to get into that. Okay, we're going to cover that in a little bit later. Not just the TCM, but any other control unit for that matter.
Right.
Right.
Because the brain of everything, but if you understand what's going to the brain, you can test if it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
Good, very good question.
Very good. And here's one clue for you. If you're going down your list of suspects and that happens to be the last one, well, like Mr. Spock used to say, once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. That's why I threw that in there. See, that came in handy. And you didn't like Mr. Spock.
I don't like Mr. Spock.
All right, now let's talk specifics. We told you what. Now let's talk a little bit about the how. Step number 1, determine what crime has been committed. How are you going to do that in the car business? Your best source of information is the customer who's driving the car. May not be the one who brought it in.
Right.
Okay? Daddy may be driving the car all the time, but he's at work. So mama brings the car in, but she doesn't know about what's going on or what's making it happen. So you really need to talk to the person who drives it all the time.
And that is important. Definitely important.
Yeah. If you can, take a test drive with that customer to try
and let them do the driving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you may drive a little different than them and not feel the actual problem.
And it could be in how they're driving the vehicle.
Right? We had one time that had it in a lower gear and thought that was normal and felt it was holding back. I said, "You're in second gear." Guy goes, "Oh, didn't know that." And these happen.
These happen.
Didn't realize it.
Of course, you're going to check the system for any related trouble codes. We're focusing on, of course, the top 10 list that we have is primarily their DTCs, their powertrain related codes, emissions related codes. But this goes for any system. And that's why we're going to tell you, if your scan tool supports enhanced data for that model that you're working on, do a full system scan. Check every module on the vehicle. And we're going to, when we get to the live car, we're going to show you an actual scan report that we got from the vehicle, and we're going to explain various reasons why this is very important today to do that full system scan.
So like we did years ago, drivability and transability, for an example. Transmission could be causing your drivability problem.
Yep.
Maybe we got a lockup converter not working right, or you could even have an ABS problem. Always look at the full scan. Super important.
Right. We also want to make sure we know any codes that may be pending in the system. And I want to stress here too, again, we're going to be showing you some uses of SnapOn's Triton DT10, and it has all the enhanced data that we're going to need tonight, but it also has global OBD2. And when it comes to emissions-related codes,
Or drivability
codes, in fact, pretty much everything that the ECM is in charge of, you can get a lot of diagnostic results from that tool or that part of the tool alone.
And in many cases, that's the only place you will get pending DTCs.
Mm-hmm.
And a pending DTC, a lot of times people don't realize it. Another good one I did in Motor Age years back on a GM truck. The DTC was for a misfire, but the problem was the pending DTC, it was a map sensor problem.
Mm-hmm.
It had a vacuum leak that it said the circuit had an issue. And if you just didn't look at pending and went to the hard code, oh, I know, it's spark related, it's fuel related, maybe it's mechanical. You start picking the pepper out of the fly do, and then you get into trouble.
Yeah. So again, what we talked about earlier, you're investigating that crime scene. You want to gather as much information, all that victimology of what you're trying to diagnose. Well, that includes taking a look at the global OBD2 information. And we're going to talk about that some more.
And don't erase the codes. And don't say you have no way to get the codes stored. Well, on the Triton, you just hit a button and you can save it. Or you take your camera, your phone out, and you take a picture.
Yep.
Don't erase. Erasing is throwing Clorox on the crime scene.
Throwing bleach on your crime scene.
And then my favorite detective, Columbo, can't find the problem. You know what I'm saying?
All right, step number 2, you want to start gathering your evidence. You're going to talk to your customers. We talked about the test drive. You're going to make your notations and observations of that. Make a visual inspection of the system. It could be something is loose. Somebody forgot to plug something in.
You know, I always say this, Pete. The most important tool is not in your box. It's what God gave us.
Right.
Your brain, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your hands. You need to use them. How many times you see something, smell something, hear something, right? It's like, you got to look at it. If you don't look at it, you will. Visual inspections are super important.
Absolutely. And not only that, but you're doing a service for your customer at the same time. Or maybe during that visual inspection, you notice there's a coolant leak, or you notice there's a worn belt, or you notice that the brakes are getting low, whatever the case might be. This is part of being a professional, being able to tell your customer what their needs are to maintain the second largest investment they're ever going to make. You know, so they rely on you as the pro. They don't have time to learn everything they know about cars. They're counting on you to be their expert.
Yeah, and you know, that just happened with a Hellcat that we just got out of here, where we had to do heads on it. From bringing it in and looking and saying to the customer, he brought it in for tire switch. You know, your antifreeze a little, oh, you know, it has been using some. I've been adding. This thing had, I don't know, 15,000 miles on it. He's on it hard. It's a Hellcat, so you can drive it hard. But make a long story short, from that, we got a job out of it. Okay. It wasn't under warranty because the guy raced the car.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, a lot of times just looking and saying something to a customer, you can get them to maybe get their car repaired properly, so it's safe and efficient.
And you build your reputation with them.
You bet.
Right.
People like when it's going good.
Freeze frame data, again, you're going to find that in the global OBD2 mode. That's the computer telling you, hey, I know you couldn't be there when this happened, but I took a picture of the standby, so maybe you couldn't be at the crime scene when the crime was going on, but here's what I captured and saw. And that can be very helpful information. And mode 6, this is kind of like a library in OBD2 of all the test results that the computer is making. Now, it takes a little understanding to make some sense out of it, but it's another source of information.
Right. It's like a little quiz. There's mode 6, and then above that, if it fails X amount of times, different from each manufacturer, as we know, it then gets elevated to a pending DTC, fails there 3 times, and then goes bingo right into a DTC that illuminates the you suck light, that check engine light that the customer is going to get bent with, right? So,
step number 3, research the facts. We've said a lot about that already. First step I go to, number 1, check for any related technical service bulletins for that model.
Super important.
Yeah, absolutely, because so many of the times when they ship these new vehicles, they can't test them for every possible scenario that those vehicles will be used in. So they learn, or the manufacturer gathers that information while they're out on the road. And they say, okay, well, this is a common thing going on here. Let's change the code in the computer that's running that system to accommodate for that. And the fix is a reflash. Okay, if it's a programming issue, you can diagnose all you want to. You're never going to find.
I'm going to give a good example. What was our #1 code? P0420. Do you know on many vehicles, especially the Asian vehicles, there's a reflash? How would you feel if you put a new converter in, and especially in states like here in New York or California, where we're on California emissions out here, if that vehicle gets a new cat and then it can't pass, they go to the dealer and the dealer says, oh, here's B. Should have reflashed it. That guy's going to want to bring his vehicle back or her vehicle back, and they want their money back.
Oh, yeah.
Because you should have reflashed it. And that's where mode 6 comes in as well. It's a bunch of parameters.
Yeah.
So always look at TSB. Super, super important.
Again, we've talked about reading up on the system operation, checking the code requirements, the enabling criteria. The flow charts you find in your service information system, that's what a junior engineer at the factory got to write as one of his first homework assignments, okay? And they're fine. They'll work if you go step by step and you perform the test specifically the way they tell you to. But my problem with it is that, first of all, many times we get a 20-page flow chart that we have to follow. We're going to say, geez, this is going to take forever. And, oh, I know that number 4, 5, and 6, they're okay. I just know
but
they
how
are.
about special tool number 1, 2, 3, 7, ID?
Right.
I don't have that.
Or so they're not always followed the way they should be. And if you're an inexperienced technician, if you don't know why you're making a certain test, then the test result means nothing to you. You don't know whether if it's a little outside of that, is that good? Is that a bad? Or is that okay?
Well, they talk at both sides of their mouth.
Yeah.
So you go down here. If this is good, okay, then you need to change the PCM. You go the other way, goes down a few more steps. If this is that way up, you need the PCM. Oh,
yeah.
How's this thing communicated?
Right.
I use a couple of those in a few of my classes, real world stuff that I came across and said, this don't make sense to me. Why doesn't it make sense? Because the computer is functioning with everything else. Everything is sense, compare, and adjust.
Yep.
If I touch something hot, I pull away because nerve endings are going to send that signal to the brain. Hopefully the stupid brain has some information and they go, hey, dummy, you don't want to get burnt, pull your hand away or your arm away, right?
Yeah.
So that's what you got to look at with a computer as well. If things working right.
Right. So use these flow charts again. That's a resource. It's information. It can give you some insight into how the system operates, what other systems may be interacting with that to make things happen. So by all means, take a look at them.
Yeah,
but
and
don't
maybe what
necessarily
step
depend on
you
them.
may be missing as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's not a bad thing to do, but you got to play with it and understand where they're going with it.
Well, as we'll see, you follow the process that we're going to show you, you'll be able to design your own tests, and you won't have to rely on that flow chart. Finally, under research the facts, and not least, the resources that we've been talking about in the beginning, check for related pattern failures. There's nothing wrong with using those informational resources, those variety of databases. There's nothing wrong with looking at Google to see what pops up. Just consider the source. If you're looking at some car forum or something, I don't know if I necessarily pay any attention to what those guys are talking about, but if I see a database from Ford that tells me X, Y, Z, or I see from another source that I can have some confidence in, then I'll pay attention to that, right? But so you can still do that. But remember, test the guess. Test the guess.
It's going to be hard for me to remember.
All right. Once you got that all down, now you can assemble your list of suspects. Remember we said in the beginning, everybody starting off in the beginning is a suspect.
Everyone.
Right? Everybody's a suspect. Now we're going to start eliminating those suspects. Select a testing method that will eliminate as many suspects as possible at one time. For example, if you're doing a misfire code, you could have problems engine mechanically, fuel, or in the ignition system. So if I can perform a test that gives me an indication that the engine mechanically is sound, I can eliminate everything related to that at one time.
And we could do that relatively quickly with the lab scope built into this tool,
right?
Where we can do relative compression. Now, granted, it's not 100% accurate on the different motors, but it's pretty damn good that a couple of scan tool manufacturers for the OEs put it in the tool like Ford and Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one way to go, okay, kind of eliminated that. If you see something a little funny, then you want to take maybe the compression gauge out or a pressure transducer or whatever to see if that's good or bad.
Right. Next, narrow your testing method to something more specific as your list of suspects begins to shrink. If we've narrowed it down to, say, the fuel system, well, now we can focus on fuel pressure, fuel volume. We can hook the scope up to the injectors. We can see what the current demand is from those, what the voltage pattern looks like. You can start getting into more specific tests until you start narrowing down that suspect list to the final one. And once you've got it narrowed down to the one you think is the culprit, test it again with a different test.
Oh, so hold it, Pete. I mean, don't just do resistance on that injector.
Yeah.
You may want to do current on that injector, or you tested pressure, but you didn't test flow. Oh, but the book told me for years, test pressure. You could have the 50 or 60 pounds, whatever the pressure may be, but yet you may not have that half a gallon a minute minimal of flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you need to play with different tests. Good point.
All right. The whole bottom line is, to perform these tests, you've got to continue exactly what all of you are doing tonight. Continuing your education, applying the lessons that you've learned, networking with your fellow technicians, putting these practices at work until they become comfortable with you in order to improve your diagnostic skills.
Right.
All right. Step number 6, go ahead.
And a lot of stuff is available online, since SnapOn is our sponsor, and Jason and the other SnapOn trainer. You can see a lot of videos, because I know we get the videos all the time, and I'll have them on specific things.
They actually have a weekly webcast
one,
training session that you can sign up and go see.
And if you have the product, you can get right on it, and many of them are for free.
Absolutely. Okay, step number 6. Once you've identified that component, repair what you've confirmed is broken, and then verify the repair is complete. Retest the entire system to make sure that there isn't some other cause contributing to the problem. It may be more than one.
Hold the piece. So we just don't throw the part in the car and just say, ship it, it's ready to go.
Right.
Because sometimes you may put that new part in, and now a monitor may run, and now you got another problem.
Sure.
It's always good to retest everything.
And the original problem may have an accomplice.
Yeah.
Could be another thing that's contributing to that.
Now, it does become a sticky wicky, being a shop owner. That is a little dicey, and thank God it doesn't happen a lot, but it will happen, and you should be aware that you may have to tell customers, look, these are a complex machine.
Yeah.
These vehicles have a lot of onboard computers that have more power than your tablet or a laptop or whatever the case may be, and there may be something else that comes up. Most of the time, it ain't going to be a problem, so we need to test drive it and take it out there.
Yep, absolutely. Like we said, verify the repair. Always verify the fix before you give it back to your customer.
No doubt.
Okay, now let's get into specific tips. I'm going to rely mainly here on the G-Man because of his much more vast experience in this than me. But now let's give you some specific tips related to those powertrain DTCs. Let's start with a little note about what it's all about.
Yeah, Pete, if it wasn't for emissions, we wouldn't have OBD in 1980, OBD1 when we started getting more info in 1988, OBD2, 1996, Canada, 1998. But these systems got faster and faster. So when you look at an old computer system, it wasn't too smart. That first GM system, 160 bits per information per second. You go over to 1988 when GM had the 12-pin connector, 8,192 bits per information per second. Go to the first OBD2 with VPW, variable pulse width, or PWM, 10,400 bits of information per second. Then we made the huge switch to Pierre got that a little earlier on with CAN, and now you're at 500 million bits of information per second, even though it may not go through the scan tool at that rate.
Right.
Okay. But that is what's speaking to each other on a bus. So emissions are what it's all about. Why do we need to move that quickly? Because we need to adjust the air-fuel ratio. And a lot of people, and we'll be talking about this, everyone relies on the scan tool, the number one tool in the country. But you still need to know how to use a meter. You still should be using a gas analyzer, not just to see what the emissions are. What is really coming out of that tailpipe is going to be what's really going on in that motor. Mm-hmm. So this is why we got all of this high-tech stuff with scan tools and computers, is to make this thing run well. And these things run damn good, don't they?
They do. I mean, consider, fellas and ladies, because I know you're out there too.
You bet. They're there.
Consider now that more and more the OEMs are moving to four-cylinder engines, four-cylinder engines. Yeah, I said that right. Only. The V8s are going to slowly be faded away. The V6s slowly faded away. Why? Because of emissions, fuel economy. We've got to get those numbers up.
54.5 miles a gallon by 2025 minimum.
Yeah. Consider today's four-cylinder engine, though. How much horsepower that thing makes per liter. It's a lot more than the big V8s back in the muscle car days.
You bet.
Okay, so they're highly tuned, highly efficient, turbocharged engines.
Supercharged
and
or
supercharged, yeah.
Look at Chrysler Corporation. The Jeeps, the Rams, all using a electric battery, lithium ion, with a motor generator called the BAS system, belt alternator starter system, that can give even more power. And you're going to see more and more that's not the only company using it.
Right.
So they need to enhance that four-cylinder to get us more miles per gallon and clean this stuff up.
Right. Yeah, and that's the whole point. Like I said, is that ECM, that's its number one job, is to make sure that the vehicle emissions remain within the standards that vehicle was certified to. And how does it do that? By making sure the cat stays happy. Right?
Yeah, and we've gone from 35-pin computers to 55 to 88 to 160-pin computers. Why did they step up so much? Because we have more sensors and actuators. And my buddy, who's a retired Ford and Audi Volkswagen engineer, Bobby Gruzinski, he basically is on the SAE committee for P codes. So we have P0300, let's say, a 5-digit code. We're going to 6-digit codes now because there's that much more on there and that much more to pick the pepper out of the fly dough.
Right.
You know, you didn't have VVT systems. You didn't have all these new things on the car, these different solenoids. We could track them and track it down. It's going to be better and better the more we have there and the more codes we could have.
Yeah. And kind of goes back to the gentleman who's talking or asking about the TCM earlier. You know, when I talk about computers with text, I tell them right up front, the computer by itself, dumb as a bag of rocks. Can't do anything by itself.
Nothing.
Okay, it has to be programmed by an engineer on what to do. And how's it going to know that? It's got to be told. So it's all these sensor inputs that tell it about the barometric pressure, what the air volume is, what the outside air temperature is, where the cam is at any given moment, where the crank, all of these sensors that are sending information to the input so the computer knows exactly what's going on at any point in time. Now, consider back in the old days, carbureted engines, didn't have to tell him nothing.
Nothing.
The air came
Your
through.
Your foot told it something. Give me more fuel.
You open up the throttle, the air came rushing through that venturi, hits that little low pressure area that drew the fuel into the airstream, but it was so inefficient. I think, what was the number, G? Like 90% of the energy created in those engines was wasted. We can't afford to do that anymore. So, and that's what these engines are doing. That's why they're getting more complicated. And to go back to that TCM thing is, that TCM has to be told what's going on. Once it knows what's going on, it goes back to what that software guy told it and said, oh, well, if you see this and you see this, do this. And then it's going to send out a command to whatever solenoid or circuit or whatever else is in charge of to carry out that command. And then somewhere along the line, it's going to have some type of feedback to let it know whether that happened right or not. So when you're diagnosing and you're debating, well, to pull the trigger on that TCM, that's one of the first things you have to make sure. Is it getting the inputs correctly? Is it sending out the outputs correctly? Is it receiving proper power and ground? Because it's an electronic device. It won't work worth a darn if it's not getting a clean power supply and has good grounds. And I don't mean unplug it and hook your test light up, see if it lights up. That's not going to do it. That's a whole nother topic.
Oh,
I don't think we'll get into it tonight.
And you got to remember this. Everything Pete just said runs on electricity.
Yeah.
There's not a baro sensor going there that's not getting an electric signal that goes through an A to D converter, analog to digital, to go, oh, that's what's in there. And yes, when that signal comes in and it says, let's say the APP, accelerated pedal position, they're stepping on it to give us a higher reading, we got to give it more fuel. Okay, we're going to change timing. Then on feedback, they go, VSS, we're not going anywhere. we got some sort of problem here. That's what's going on. It's the back and forth, all based on electricity.
Yeah.
This is why we said, you know, you got to test, not guess. You're going to have to know how the circuit works and comparing it like that TCM. You know, a good thing SnapOn has in the unit for years, even if you had the old brick from yesteryear, you had the troubleshooting info that's all built in here. And they would have one for the oxygen sensor. You would put your scan tool on there. You would look at the oxygen sensor. You would back probe the sensor. You would wet your hands. I call it the spit test because I'm not going to go get a cup of water. So back probe pin. This way your body conducts good electricity. Touch the positive side. What should we see on the oxygen sensor? Voltage should be up. If we looked at short-term fuel trim, or in the old days when they made it, integrator and block learn, integrator should move, should go the opposite way. If you see the expected change from the computer, when you put it input, it's going to do that. Another example would be putting regulated shop air, no more than 7 pounds, unless you like blowing in the air snorkel, okay? And you wouldn't put 150 because if it wasn't broken, it will be broken, okay? But if I put more grams of air through, shouldn't I get a wider pulse width or a higher fuel trim reading? Sure.
Yeah, sure.
It's all common sense, and that's how you can test the computer out, whether it be a TCM or a PCM, by breaking it down in those sections.
So let's dive in next to on our topic of knowing victimology. When it comes to diagnosing powertrain codes, it's not Mrs. Johnson that's your customer. It's the ECM that's your customer, because it's the one passing or failing a given component or system. It's the one that's turning on the check engine light. If you don't satisfy it, it's just going to come back on again. So part of your victimology, part of your understanding, part of your research is knowing how the ECM works. What does it think? How does it perform these tests? And the first thing you want to know is that there are certain, what we call monitors.
Oh, but Pete, I don't need those. I live in Florida like you. We don't have an inspection test. Stop. This has nothing to do with an inspection test. This really has to do, these monitors on the vehicle, to let you know, the technician mechanic, if things are ready to set that light. Mm-hmm. Because people will come back if the light is on, and they don't know the difference when that code came on last time. Unless you printed it out and said, you had a lean condition, or you had this, here's the code. Soon as they see the light come on, they come back and say, you suck. And it always is when you want to get the hay out of your shop, okay? So we document everything. Mm-hmm. Screenshots, we use it off our SnapOn. We put it in Dropbox, sends it to all our computers. But we also tell them, you know, you got 2 monitors not ready. Your catalyst is not ready, and your oxygen sensor is not ready. So they go, what's that mean? Well, that could mean, Mr. Pete, your check engine light may come on. Unless you want us to drive it, you leave it with us. We'll drive it home. You pay for the gas. We'll drive it home. Usually nowadays, the newer cars we work on, 1 trip home and back, and the monitors are pretty well set. Mm-hmm. EVAP can be a little bit of a bear, but most of them are pretty quick. So what you should know, there are 3 continuous monitors, which means they run all the time. Now, Pete, I know everyone knows misfire. We talked about that. It could be mechanical, it could be fuel, it could be spark, or it could be EGR, VVT, something related that is going to make the engine run lousy. Mm-hmm. Fuel, I could guess that one. It must be the fuel that's in the vehicle. The gas in this case, and it could be the way we deliver it, the injectors or the circuit that it's on. But what is this comprehensive component or CCM monitor?
The comprehensive component monitor is all the sensors that are required to send that information into the computer. We got to make sure they're all working. And if one drops offline, we want to know about it. Because think about it, guys. Like I said, in the carbureted days, air went through the carburetor, it picked up the fuel on its way into the engine. That's all we needed to do. But now, if I want the computer to send the right amount of fuel in, I've got to tell it about that air. Exactly everything I can about it. It's got to know how heavy it is, how much it is, how cold it is, how much humidity is in it. Everything it needs to know about how much air is going in. And once it does, well, it already knows what the vehicle fuel pressure is, right? It already knows or has been programmed to know what the fuel rate of the injectors is, right? So based on that information, it can computate how much fuel it needs to add. in order to properly mix that air that came in. And then it's got the feedback from the oxygen sensors to let it know whether it hit the mark or not, right? So if any of these inputs are not correct or they're lying, then it can't make the accurate computation, can it? So we keep an eye on that all the time.
Right. So in the comprehensive component, like Pete was just saying, the mass airflow sensor is in there. It doesn't have a separate monitor like the oxygen sensor or EGR. The tranny solenoids are in there. The fuel injections, they're in a bit of fuel, but every solenoid, everything else is in comprehensive component that we need for feedback.
Sure. And the non-continuous monitors, they're the opposite of the continuous. They run once during a key cycle. So we're just going to, and I should also include here that if all the test conditions have been met, as G pointed out, some take very little to complete. Sometimes that evap may take a little longer. The older the model of the car, the more difficult it's going to be to set, because all the conditions that need to be met before the tests can be performed. It's got to have so much, can't have but so much fuel in the tank.
Correct.
It can't be sloshing around in the tank. It has to be driven at a steady speed for a certain amount of time, and all these other factors that come into play.
Especially something very simple like the battery. You may have put the wrong one in there, but it looks like the same size. But is it the same CCA rating?
Mm-hmm.
And did that battery get registered? Oh, that's only for the Euro guys. No. Chrysler, Ford, GM, they're all starting to do this thing. So all of these things, is the alternator charger right? Is the thermostat good? That is all important to make these monitors run to be ready. And if they're not ready, there's the chance of the customer coming back and going, you didn't fix my car.
Right.
So make sure they're ready.
Now, one that should be on the non-continuous list that I failed to put on there is the thermostat monitor.
Yep.
That was a fairly new one. Air conditioning always kind of tickled me that that's on there. I mean, you figure, why is air conditioning in the ECM? Well, think about it. When the air conditioning's turned on, it increases the load on the engine. So the engine has to compensate. It has to open up the throttle a little bit more, and that burns a little more fuel. So it's under the engine's control because it does impact emissions and fuel economy.
Right. You may not see the air conditioning monitor as ready.
Right.
Usually it's not there. Originally started for R12, that was phased out in the early 90s beforehand, then left in there because 134A was going to be global warming, but they've never used it. And you may go, well, how would they know if it's in there or not? There's pressure sensors on the line. Mm-hmm. They could read that the pressure is lower than the expected pressure. So that you most likely don't see. And what's not on here is a heated cat, but that's only on a few very high-end cars.
And as G pointed out, when you're looking at these and part of your diagnostic process, we want to know which ones have made it through their testing. Because if they say ready, they made it through their testing. If they say not ready, then they haven't completed their testing, or there's some reason
they haven't done it,
keeping them from running that test. And that may be, as you said, that might be the bull that comes to bite you in the backside if you don't advise your customer of that. And then you may see some that are NA. They're just not applicable for that particular car.
And if that monitor is not ready, as Pete brings up, where do we look? Pete went over this before, mode 6.
Yep.
You're probably having a lot of failures in mode 6.
All right, let's talk about how the ECM does its work. Do you have a question or no? Okay. One of the tests that the ECM performs is electrical integrity. It checks these sensors and actuators for shorts to ground, shorts to power, or an open circuit. And you've all seen these circuit high, circuit low codes.
Okay, and let's stop there for a second.
Sure.
That is important. Circuit high, 9 out of 10 times is going to be an open. Circuit low is going to be a short. Okay, so when you see that, but right away if someone says they see this throttle position, circuit low, you know what they say? Oh, throttle position. I need a throttle position sensor. No, you don't. Stop. Read what it says. It says circuit. Okay. If it says circuit voltage low, is it being pulled down? And it can go on any sensor, any actuator. Mm-hmm. Always look at that.
Another test that the ECM uses is called a rationality test. In other words, does that tested component make sense when it's compared to another sensor? This is when you say like MAF sensor and throttle position do not agree.
Right. So the throttle's going up, but the MAF never moves.
Right. How
could that be? Especially if they look back and go, the dude's doing 35 miles an hour. Why isn't that moving? Throw that light on. That's what they're going to do.
And the third basic test that the ECM uses is functionality. Does the tested component that when it's operated, does it cause the expected reaction? And here's where, like, for example, an EGR valve, when the computer's testing that and it opens up the valve, some, like I think Chrysler's one, if it sees a shift in the oxygen sensor response at that moment, then it knows it opened. So this is a functionality test, and there are other ways that the computer uses. Why are we making a big point of this? Because you can test it the same way.
Exactly.
If you know what the ECM is doing.
No doubt. You can use, some companies use a map sensor to do that, or a baro sensor type setup.
Okay, I want to point out, though, as a caution, these examples given are just that. They're examples. You know, while there are standardized codes, the OEMs are still free to design their own testing procedure for their particular makes, you know, for their particular models. All right, you must do your homework. You got to look up the code definition. You got to understand the criteria that's specific to the car that you're looking at in your bay.
No doubt.
Not just because, again, it's a Honda Accord. No, it is a particular year, make, model, engine, transmission, combo. You need to know you're looking at for that particular car. Understanding, though, how the ECM tests will help you create your own test methods and ultimately create that general test to eliminate suspects, narrow down with a specific pinpoint test, and then finally, knowing that the test you perform will also allow the ECM to perform that same test and pass it.
Correct.
And like I said before, it isn't Miss Johnson that's your customer. It's that guy there. It's the ECM. If you do not make a repair that will allow that system to meet the ECM's expectations when it tests it again, well, then the USEC light comes on for good reason. Because you did not fix the car properly. You did not verify your repair.
Now, this is an older computer with an old memcal set there. Okay. Now, the old days, we could have just put a new memcal in, looked on our SnapOn scan tool, see what the number was, put a new one in for the upgraded file. Nowadays, if you replace this computer, we should bring up at this point, you're going to need to have the right credentials. So you should go to NASTF.org, NASTF.org, that's the National Automotive Task Force, and you could sign up for a VSP, Vehicle Service Professional / locksmith license. Why? Because if I don't have those credentials and I put this computer in this newer vehicle, car won't run. And you should be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other nice thing about the website, you can also, as an additional resource, access the factory service information. There are links to the various manufacturers on the NASTF.org website that will take you right to them. Now, there's a subscription for these. If you're a pro, you probably already know this, for either a day or a few days or a week or a month or a year, whatever you pick. And if you need that to help fix that customer's car, as far as I'm concerned, that's the cost of the repair. You know, that's going to get billed to the customer in some way, shape, or form, right? So,
and some with programming, Snap-on sells a J2534. The J2534 can be used with the factory software to program the vehicle.
Right. All right. Now we're going to take the next step. We talked about the global OBD2 functions of your scan tool, like the Triton T10, and we're going to look at it a little later on. But this is true to any tool that's certified to global OBD2. There are 10 modes or methods of operation in the tool. If you want to refer to them as that, let's start with number 1. Mode 1, the $ means it's just a hexadecimal number. It's just computer speak. Don't need to worry about that. Mode 1 is where you find the live data and the status of the monitors.
Yeah, so there's your PIDs. So you wanted to look at RPM, you wanted to look at any of that stuff, it's all there.
Now, I want to caution that the data list in OBD2 may not or will not be as extensive as in the enhanced or on the factory tool, but you should have all the PIDs you need to handle a powertrain or emissions-related complaint. And
here's the freeze frame you spoke about before. Yep. So maybe you could see the guy was doing 55 miles an hour. Or maybe he's complaining about cutout, but he was at 98 miles an hour. Oh, was that Pierre driving? No. That 98 may have been the fuel cutoff on that car, right? And that's not a problem. His guy's car can't go faster than that. Why? Because it was programmed like that.
Yeah. True story. True story. I had a customer brought in her son's WRX for a complaint of rough running at highway speeds. And the light was on. There were some misfire codes in there, and pulled up the codes, pulled the freeze frame, and I noticed under vehicle speed, it was 102 miles an hour. I told Mama, I said, maybe you should tell your boy to drive at the speed limit. He won't have any problems. Guess what? Mama traded in that WRX that day.
Smart move. Smart move.
These are just a sample of PIDs. What's really nice is that the newer model vehicles, this PID list has gotten more extensive and much more usable than what we were dealing with back in 96, 97.
And a complaint a lot of times on freeze frame is, like with EVAP, it's not the greatest, but on on most DTCs, they are good. So don't be discouraged if you go, well, I don't know, on EVAP, it didn't give it to me. Yeah, we understand that.
That's a great point. I want to take that one more step. Remember the continuous monitor codes or continuous monitors we talked about? There's misfire. Then there's the ones to fuel delivery. That's your fuel trim codes. And then the comprehensive component. These are the continuous monitors. That means they're being tested all the time. Freeze frame is where you are needed for the continuous monitors because they're being tested all the time. And you want to know what conditions that they failed under. The non-continuous monitors, the EVAP, CAT efficiency, we already know when these are going to be tested because the computer's already told us. These are the parameters. Hey, I'm going to look at this after it's sat for 8 hours and then driven for 35 miles, and it's going to tell us all that. So I don't need freeze frame data to fix those. These are primarily when you're dealing with those continuous monitors.
Correct.
So freeze frame, like I said, it's a snapshot of the engine operating conditions at the time the ECM recorded the matured fault. Again, this is, we weren't at the crime scene, so it's giving us a snapshot of what happened right then and there. Okay. It does not tell us if the car was accelerating, decelerating, or maintaining a steady state. So keep that in mind. It's most useful, like I said, for diagnosing continuous monitor faults. And as G pointed out very clearly, do not clear the codes until you're ready to verify your fix because you're going to clear out the freeze frame data as well. You might as well just pour that bleach all over your crime scene. You've given all the evidence and washed it away.
You bet. On later model vehicles, especially here in New York State, we're a mission program. So you may have that where you are, and I say mission program and OBD2 program. A lot of new ones, if you fix the problem, the monitor will run itself, turn the light off, and then the code will be gone. You don't have to clear all of them out. You need to read the service information to make sure. A lot of late models, you fix it, it's going to do its own thing.
Next on the list, mode 3. This is the one you guys recognize as this is where codes are set. This is where you go to pull the codes, mode 3. There can be two types, type A or type B. Not a lot of type A codes. These are the ones that one failure will set the code. In most cases, though, it takes at least 2 trips in succession in order for that code to be logged and failed.
Right.
Mode 4, that's where you go to clear out the codes. It's going to clear the mature DTC. It's going to turn off the check engine light. It's going to clear that freeze frame out. In some cases, it will even clear out monitor test data and may reset some, if not all of the monitors to a not ready status. That's why you have to go perform that drive cycle.
This is where take your hands and do something else with them, because when you hit the clear button, you just blew everything out.
It's all gone. Yeah.
So monitors will reset.
And that's real common with less experienced techs when they're getting their first taste of drivability diagnosis. The first impulse, while they got the scan tool hooked up, is to get the read the codes and then clear it and then go back to work on trying to fix it. Mode 5, test results of the individual tests that make up the oxygen sensor monitor. This is an older use. This is now found in part of mode 6.
Yes.
And pre-CAN and all the CAN model vehicles.
So only if you want to write a note on mode 5, it's only on vehicles that were 96 to roughly 1999, and not every manufacturer used it. All of the oxygen sensor tests that were put in here that no longer reside there are just, like Pete said, into mode 6. So that was a early model type setup. It could never go on a CAN system, but 1996 to about 99, maybe 2000, Toyota used it, GM used it. Not all companies use it.
Right.
So,
mode
questions
6
here or no?
No, actually, you covered it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, mode 6. These are the test results for all the non-continuous monitors. It's also a listing of individual test results that make up those non-continuous monitors. The monitor can have one test or it can have several in order to finish testing a system. On vehicles equipped with the controller area network, the misfire monitor results are also included in
nice, good stuff. So you can see if a misfire is happening. We've done some webinars on that together.
On pre-CAN Ford vehicles, Ford added some misfire test results in there as well. So they didn't have any misfire on their enhanced data.
But they put them
but
in
they
there.
did have it in mode 6. Information needed to decipher that today is a lot easier to come by. In fact, many scan tools translate it for you automatically. Back in the old days, it was all hexadecimal, and we had no clue what the numbers meant or what they related to. But now they tell us, it's measured in RPMs, or it's in degrees, or
Right,
it's in,
PSI,
variation,
or whatever
the case might be.
percentage.
And it can be very helpful in diagnosing a variety of these concerns. Well,
And if your scan tool does not decipher that, you know what you can do? You can go to nastf.org and go to the OEM.
yes.
And 9 out of 10 times, they give you that without paying on the pay side of the website.
Yep.
So you can get the right information there. No need to buy somebody's special book that probably is not correct in the first place.
Mode 7, this is where the continuous monitor test results are. This is where you find the pending codes. So we want to make sure that after we've gone through and we checked all of our full system scan, we pull up the OBD2 and we check the pending codes there as well. These are basically the first time that a 2-trip code failed. They can let us know what's waiting in the wings.
Yep.
Mode 8, not in use by every model vehicle, but it can come in handy on some. It's request control of the onboard systems, test, or component. Right now, it's simply a bidirectional command that seals the EVAP system on some makes and models, not all, but it can be helpful if you're dealing with an EVAP
so it's
code.
roughly about 2010-ish or so, but doesn't work on every vehicle. Some manufacturers did not do it.
No. Mode 9. This is where you'll find the vehicle VIN and the current ECM calibration. That's going to be very helpful information. In fact, my son has a Dodge diesel that it started when he took it to the shop, but now they put a used ECM in it. And guess what? Now it won't start. So I wonder what the problem might be. Oh, maybe that junkyard ECM still has the VIN for another vehicle in it.
And it's going, hey, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
You got to program the right VIN in it, and sometimes program the whole.
Sure. And this can give you some also information when you're looking up that TSB and it says the latest flash update is XYZ number 12345. You can look that up there too. So the VIN should match the VIN of the vehicle. And of course, the ECM, like I said, you can compare that to.
And calibration files, like if you were on a GM, you go to Cal ID, it would basically tell you what files you can match them up to what's showing on your scan tool.
And finally, mode $OA, that's mode 10. These are the permanent DTCs. This is a very interesting category. Gee, why don't you share what you know about mode 10?
This mode 10 is starting mid-2011 models. You may see some early, but most time it's mid-year and up. 2011, anything under, you can't get it. If someone erases the codes, oh, it's my best friend. I just go here and go, I got the info. You can't erase this, only the computer erase it. But hold it, I'll disconnect the battery. Nah, I will use my scan tool. Nah, ain't doing it. Sorry. No way to get it out of there. And it has a separate criteria. It's not just 3 good trips or 40 warm-ups. It's going to be a while before it clears it out. It has to see the exact criteria, and only an engineer knows who programmed it how many times. Yeah. So this is very, very important. We love this because the parts store down the road that does the clear game can't see anything, but if they come in with a late model vehicle, you can see everything.
Yeah.
Yep. Very important.
Very good. All right, next. Oh, the fun part. Now let's talk about some diagnostic tips for the various codes that we talked about in our top 10. And we're going to start with, I know, with the G-Man's favorite, the 42430s. He's got a great class on this topic alone, and he's not going to give the whole class tonight.
No, I'm just going to say a few
but
things.
We'll give him the highlights.
Okay, so for the catalytic converter, we got pre-cat is an oxygen sensor that is going to be for fuel control. Post-cat is going to be to check the difference between the front and the rear. The front oxygen sensor should always dither, mean going up and down. If it's an air-fuel ratio sensor, it's usually pretty steady, and dependent on the vehicle, has to be at a certain level of voltage. The rear should never dither unless you're doing brum, brum, brum. If you're doing brum, 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 if it don't dither, you may have a problem like fuel trim being out of whack. Great article I wrote in Motor Age again. All these things pop in my head. But people don't realize, go, what do you mean the rear O2 is going to control fuel trim? Yes. A lot of manufacturers do that. Not all of them, but most of them do. So now in the front part of the cat, you have rhodium. Rhodium is a precious metal for NOx, oxides of nitrogen. Platinum and palladium would be in the rear part of the cat. That is for HC, hydrocarbons, and CO, carbon monoxide. That breaks it down, and people don't realize this. If we use like the thermal imager we have, it's great for cats because I can see the front part of the cat that you may think is hotter because it's coming from that hot agent. No, the precious metals make a chemical reaction that it should be actually hotter at the exit. There used to be a test in California, but they did away with it with a temperature gun because of shielding and stuff. It's not as accurate. A thermal imager could actually see and be a lot better. You may have seen some of those slides that I've done. So a catalytic converter efficiency, it's if the substrate is broken, is a problem. BMW had a problem. You see this white stuff here is called matting. Now, I didn't know this, but I did stuff for a company called Bozell. And matting has to be broken in. You do not want to put a new cat on a car and go, gonna take it for a ride. Wah! Not a good idea. Warm it up. Let the matting expand. The BMWs had a problem where the substrate would turn when you got on it, cut off a couple of fuel injectors, a couple of ignition coils, and not let it back on until it's seen a certain amount of resistance backed off. How did they check that? Well, from a mass airflow sensor. We can check the grams going in. There wasn't a back pressure sensor there. So this P0 420, 430, here in the shop, no lie, we fix 95% of them without changing the cat. If the cat's not damaged, and we got dudes that have limos that have 200,000-300,000 on there. The one car I had that my son Craig winded up using, I think that car had 400-something thousand miles on it. Little Dodge 2.5 turbo. Don't know how it went that far, but it did because I did maintenance. Catalytic converter was still efficient. Did not set a code. It's all about maintenance. Okay. Question.
One of my comments. Do not disregard exhaust system integrity. We've had a number of calls where people can't figure out why monitors don't run or why they have cat efficiency problems, trim problems, and it's actually false air, and it can be behind the rear sensor.
Yes. Now that is, you bring up a good point, Pierre, and let's take Subaru, for example, with a TSB, Toyota. A lot of them have what they call a pre-cat. That's a rhodium-based cat for NOx. Then they have this cat, and you'll see there's the sensor back here, and you go, well, I don't care about that. There's another cat after that, and I'm only changing this cat. Never do it. It's like changing one shoe. Even though this sensor, let's say, and there's another cat behind it, they're not putting it in for no reason. Any exhaust leak. Now, Nissan's had cracked manifolds. It was a big problem. That's pirated air. Intake leaks are bad, but exhaust leaks are bad. We have something here. We took a pressure regulating device with our shop air, regulated it down to 5 pounds of pressure. We got a couple of videos up on YouTube with that. And you can check for leaks in the system. It's not hard. Your smoke machine will not have, unless you have the very high powered one, right, will not have enough power going through. If you have a leak, a broken bung, the bung for the O2 sensor, a crack in it, a crack in a pipe.
The flex pipes.
Flex pipes are a biggie. Okay. Yep. Now, when you get something like those $2,800 catalytic converters on an Audi, okay, the flex pipe is a #1 problem. If you let that flex pipe go too far, well, you're going to wind up killing the substrate of the cat. There's no taking it back by doing a chemical process. So very good point bringing it up here.
Yeah. And again, what we want you to understand here when you're diagnosing these, just because it's got the word catalytic converter in it, doesn't mean that the catalytic converter is bad. You know, what I like to do too is I like to look at the substrate. Now, if it's melted down, you're not going to see that going in. It usually melts in the middle, but you should be able to kind of hold it up and kind of see some light coming through if it's all the way clear.
Right.
Another factor, like you pointed out, the substrate's broken. Well, you take a rubber mallet, give us a few whacks, and you'll hear that stuff bouncing around.
Oh.
You can also use that thermal imager. If it's got a melted section of the substrate, well, guess what? You're going to see this cold part in the middle of the converter where nothing's going on. So there's a number of ways that you can do. Now, if that's the case, yeah, you got to replace the cat. But as G pointed out, there's a lot of things that can mimic or affect the way the ECM is performing the test. As he explained, the front O2 compared to the rear O2, if they match, the code is going to be set. The ECM thinks there's a problem with the cat. But if there's air coming in that's not supposed to be there, or if there's extra fuel coming in, or coolant coming in, or oil coming in, all of these things can impact the way they function. If you see the cat is bad, if it's clogged or it's really not working the way it should, as G said again, he can fix a lot of them, because a lot of times it's just the surfaces that are coated with contaminants from the engine. Great example, Saturn 1.9s. They used to burn oil like no tomorrow. And you couldn't, no smoke out of the pipe, because the cat did a great job of keeping all that oil in itself. But all that oil is now coating those passages and preventing the converter from doing its job, right? So good cleaning, as they do here, often removes that debris and restores that cat performance. But you also have to fix what caused the problem in the first place. The ECM has to give that converter a very narrow range of feed gases for the converter to work the way it's supposed to. If it doesn't, the converter is going to overheat and it's going to fail. So if you have a failed converter, it's not just a matter of hanging a new converter. You also have to find out and fix what caused it to fail in the first place.
And see, you know, a good check for that is the 5-gas analyzer.
Yep.
Because what you're going to see, again, people become code dependent, right? They look at a code and put it in. But what caused it? You put that new cat in and that cat is bad a year from now, the customer is going to be bent. That's an expensive part.
Yeah.
How about seeing what's coming out of it? Do we have good combustion efficiency? Do we have high oxygen? Oh, high oxygen tells you right away you got a misfire that you didn't find. Lean condition, rich command. That's what kills a cat. Maybe the evap purge is stuck. Hey, I've seen these things, and you know, you could have a whole bunch of different things. A bad pressure regulator, Ford had those issues. There's things that you must look at before you go, I'm done with this thing. I sent it out and you finished.
Right. All right.
Moving along.
On to the next one. Fuel system lean codes. Oh, very common.
Super common.
Yeah.
That's why they're up there. So lean. Well, what could happen? There's no more fuel filters, at least in this shop, that we see on a rail anymore. They're all integral into the tank. But a lean condition could be some sort of clog, right? It could be a line we've seen over the years, someone crush a fuel line coming up. You don't have the volume. We could have a weak fuel pump. There's where current ramping with your lab scope could help. And a good volume test, not just pressure.
Right.
Do we have the correct volume coming up? Are my injectors clogged? Maybe rather than a nice conical pattern, we're not getting all that fuel through that 1 to 2 micron screen.
Oh, you mean everybody's suspect?
Everybody's suspect.
Everybody's suspect.
You got to check everything.
All right.
I don't see anything up there.
How are you cleaning the cat is the question.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so how are we cleaning the cat? We use a chemical from Run Right, and we do a drip method. Okay, a drip method goes into a central vacuum port. Usually one of your best central vacuum ports is going to be the purge valve, because most manufacturers want to make sure if I'm adding fuel, I'm adding it to a central location. Now, not to say some power boosters won't do that, but Euro cars sometimes will only pull vacuum off 2 cylinders for the power booster. And PCV would be very good, but hold it. If I'm on a car, you know, some of the Hondas, we just did a Chevy Cruze the other day. These things don't have a PCV. They got a valve cover breather system with a diaphragm. So where are you going to go? You're going to go to the purge, and you got to slowly drip it. Now that works good on a hot motor to break it down, and takes a good part of the day, and never ever do it in your shop unless you got a death wish. You do it outside in an open area.
So pretty much you're doing like an induction cleaning from the front back.
From the front back. What happens, the cat's going to get hot.
Yeah.
Now this will work. I mean, we have great success rate with it. It really does help break down the buildup that was in that cat.
And now the system lean, where we talked about everybody's suspect, what's a general test that I could make that would help me eliminate some suspects? Well, remember, this is a continuous monitor, and it tests under a variety of conditions. Are those fuel trims remaining the same throughout the RPM load range? Is it happening just at the bottom end at idle? Is it happening just at the high end? All of these are clues as to what's causing the problem, especially with math-equipped engines. especially, you can help pinpoint the difference between a MAF sensor fault, fuel delivery fault, or a vacuum leak using that knowledge, right? So
and let's talk about that vacuum leak. You're going to be at the low end of the fuel trim numbers. You're going to be at idle is where your problem is. Once you race it up, if it goes away, then you know you got a vacuum leak. If it's when you're stepping into it and it's not doing it, like I just said, at idle, then you got a fuel delivery problem. And that could be, let's not forget, the number one thing we've done over the years, voltage drop problem. You could have corrosion or oxidation at the positive or negative terminal of that fuel pump and or relay, giving you that problem.
So in other words, what you did and what your techs do in your shop is you use the method to eliminate a bunch of suspects at one time.
You bet.
And once you've got it down, okay, when we know it's a fuel delivery, now we can do the pinpoint tests for the pump pressure, the pump volume, electric circuit, the integrity of the electrical circuit before we finally pull the trigger on the part that's causing the problem.
You know, I always say, don't take the backhoe out like Pierre. He has one. If the shovel will do.
Right.
Don't overthink it. Again, knowing the system, knowing what to test.
Next one. Like that picture? That's pretty cool.
That is.
PO300 and all the related misfire codes, engine misfire detected, whether it's random or cylinder specific. Of course, there are some related codes that indicate the conditions under which the engine was operating when that occurred. We want to look at freeze frame. We want to gather the information we can. But the biggest thing I want you to know here is that everybody's suspect. Just because it's got the word fire in misfire doesn't mean we start throwing ignition coils and spark plugs at it. We have to test the guess before we put the parts on it. And it can be mechanical. In fact, even more common now from what all of you are telling us that you're seeing are mechanical related issues due to carbon buildup from the GDI engines. Can an intake valve or a valve seal 1 minute and not seal the next? Of course it can. You don't think about it, but it can. So now we have an engine that, seals 100% 1 second, and then a half second later, it's got no compression in it. How are you going to find that? A variety of different ways you can, but don't discount that suspect. Don't assume that that's not a part of the problem and go straight to the ignition system.
And always start with the basics, like, do you have oil in there? With VVT systems, or Vanos, as the Germans who really came up with it for years, do we have enough oil? Too much, too little could be a problem, okay? And do we have the correct oil in the car?
Yeah, big deal. Yeah, big deal.
I'd like to add, look up in service information what kind of special features that vehicle might have, like displacement on demand.
DOD, displacement on demand, or the MDS, like on Chryslers, where they cut them off and the solenoid sometimes goes bad.
Right. Because there are some, again, this goes back to what we said at the very beginning. Do your homework, know the victimology, the system that you're working on, the code criteria, the conditions, how that system operates. This is all part of it. And I'm sure we'll both agree. If you take the time to do the homework up front, before you even crack open the toolbox or pop the hood, you'll spend a lot less time finding the problem.
Right.
Okay.
And like the big box scope of yesteryear, my old Sun machines, okay, they tested the battery, which you should start with. A good battery is an important thing. Then they tested mechanical. Then they tested ignition. Then they tested the fuel, from gas analysis. When you went through that, you had that game plan. You had the test ready to go to see if you had a mechanical problem or ignition or fuel. So that's what you need to do.
EVAP emissions. Okay. The first thing is don't touch the gas cap. Test the system first. If it may not be tightened all the way, it may have a bad seal, but how do you know that? Just by going up and clicking it. You got to make sure that that's the problem before you begin. And here really is where you have to do your homework. G's written a number of courses on EVAP testing that you can check with the tstseminars.org website for some more information on those. And he goes into all these different systems, whether it's a natural vacuum leak detection or leak detection pump. All of these different EVAP systems have a different way of being tested. Okay. And then there's some other great tools that you can use to help you find these leaks. Don't just start pumping smoke into it, because as G has found out, that's a petroleum-based product. What happens to the smoke?
The smoke turns to oil, and then that canister is a problem. Now, you know, another thing, I was just teaching down in the city, and the police cruisers are using these Explorers that are a hybrid system. But you know, one of the things where you find a lot of information, I took out the brand new owner's manual that was in the box, ripped the plastic, a brand new vehicle, not even in service yet. And I looked through it, and it came to the capless system. Now, listen to this one carefully. Some people take the big funnel that you got from one of your oil additive companies and you stuff it down there and you think it's going to work. They had a caution. Only use the correct funnel that comes with the car that's capless. Okay? There are two little doors in there. And here's the other caution. If you go to a gas station and the nozzle, the part that goes in that has the spring, a lot of them have broken springs, especially if it's a lousy station, they don't keep up on their equipment. When you go down too far and that spring part may catch one of the lips, that is going to bend it a itsy bit that you may think nothing of. There's your evap leak. There's no cap to tighten.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be careful. And I was really surprised. I took a picture of the book that I gave to my students in the class. I went, look at that. You know, I say this, but I love when they put the stuff in print.
Yeah.
Because that's right from Ford Motor Company.
Yeah.
Pretty neat.
So again, on this particular one, doing your homework is a big part of being able to handle those. All right. Now we're ready to start a live problem. And then we're going to spin over here to this. This actually was a customer car here at G's shop and has an actual code in it. We have our Triton DT10 connected to it. And we're going to try to do a little bit of both here. Pardon for looking at my back, but bear with me for just a minute. Let me go in here. I'm going to flick the key on this thing. Now, one of the first things we're going to do is we have to do our investigative of the crime scene. Customers coming in with a complaint of a check engine complaint and some running conditions. So we've got our scan tool hooked up. And I wish I could have shown this to you earlier. I tell you what, when I got this out and started looking at it, this thing boots up like now, very very fast. And when you've got it to key on and you hook up to the DLC, it automatically jumps into
I know why.
The vehicle.
It's not a Windows base.
So let's go ahead. We're going to select the scanner function on here. We'll pull up the Honda. There you are. And that's going to ask us automatic ID or manual ID. I'm going to select automatic. Give it a moment to populate, and there you go. How fast is that? So now we know we got a 2012 Honda Accord sedan. There's the engine type. There's the VIN. We can type in the odometer and the license plate, so we have this information, you know, for our records when we're done. We can verify the information, make sure it's correct. Hit OK. Here's where we get to start. Code scan. Okay, I want to check what and see what the computer might have to tell me. So let's select code scan. Collecting the data, please wait.
And this is something that should be performed on every vehicle you work on.
I'm going to tell you something else too. We said earlier about doing the full system scan. I would encourage you to do that on whatever vehicle comes into your bay, even if it's there for a routine maintenance.
Cha-ching.
You never know what's going to be in there that your customer doesn't know about that could result in business for you. Now, here's key. Pre-scan, post-scan. I'm going to do a pre-scan. I'm going to check every module in the vehicle so I know what's going on in addition to the information I'm looking for the customer's complaint. And while I was doing that, what's really cool about this tool is that the data that's collected is connected to this shop's cloud account with SnapOn. It's called altusdrive, I believe it is, .com.
Correct.
And you can link your tool to it on your Wi-Fi, and the report that we look up here will automatically go to that cloud account. And from there, I can keep it for my records. I can share it with another shop or technician. I can share it with the customer. And it comes into and we'll show you the format of what it all looks like. It's really nice.
And I could even use my SnapOn thermal imager the same way.
Yeah.
Everything here gets recorded right to there.
Yeah, a lot of the SnapOn tools can be used with that cloud account. Now, another point, not only is the report there, but any screenshots I might take of any of the tests or the results that I get are also stored there. So I have a nice record of everything that I've done. All right, so we're all, well, not quite completed. We'll give it another second here too. 82%.
Yep, still processing. Is, you know, cars have
quite a few modules on the vehicle. Yep.
So it's going to check all of them.
And we're checking them all.
And it's nice that it's going to give you a report that you can see in a format that can be printed. And again, when you don't do this, you know, this is key to see if monitors are done. There's a code, maybe in an ABS system. And you wake up in the morning, hopefully to go to work to make money, whether you're a tech or a shop owner. And you also want to keep the customer's best interest. There's nothing more important than telling them, hey, you know, you have a problem. Rather than having breakdown maintenance, you have a problem in this particular system that needs to be addressed.
I'd like to add something to that. It's credibility. Your customers are going to trust you more and believe what you say if you tell them about all these things, even if they don't know they're existing, you know, when they drive in.
Yeah.
They'll know you're looking after their interests.
Here's another reason for doing the all system scan. As you're looking down the list of modules, are there any that are ADAS related? Nowadays, you have to be very careful with the vehicles that you're working on. If they have an ADAS related system, there are a lot of routine services that you may be performing that's going to affect how these systems function. If you do something that makes a change in how that system functions, guess who's responsible for making sure it functions the way it's supposed to?
You
are.
And that means sometimes leaning over a grill. Well, in that grill may be radar, or you took the grill off to get to a headlight, because a lot of them you have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or there's some suspension work you've done, and now it's not level. The ADAS is going to be a biggie, and SnapOn does have an ADAS solution as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so here's what we're looking at. We're looking at P1009 VTC activation malfunction, advanced malfunction. So that's one of the codes we're looking at. We've also got one in the tire pressure monitor system, tire 4, low air pressure. So we probably want to check that, make sure we don't have a customer who sends them out on a flat tire.
And that's super important, right? You don't want anyone going out, getting a flat, you know, you're the last one to see the car. You need to check everything, all the fluid levels, air pressure. And that's why we have TPMS on a vehicle, right? Tire pressure monitoring system was to protect people from the Ford Explorer issues that they had years back.
Now, here we have another one. PCM malfunction.
Uh-oh. That's a uh-oh one.
That could be. That's, again, we're collecting that data. That's a suspect. That's just another, make sure we keep them in the pool. We're not going to discount the fact that, oh, it can't be the computer. Well, yeah, it can. Maybe it is. Don't know yet. We have to continue on with our testing. So let's take a closer look here at the 1009. SnapOn offers a feature called Intelligent Diagnostics. SnapOn, of course, is a parent company for Mitchell 1, ProDemand. If you're familiar with their system, their SureTrack data system, there is a lot of information gathered. I think they're probably one of the largest databases in the business.
I believe so.
And a lot of them are verified fixes.
Guys like you and I, because we use this in the shop.
Getting on the site, yeah.
Yeah, and these fixes are the real deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it doesn't mean just go change that part.
Right.
Because this is giving you a sense of direction. You still got to steer the car, per se, right? And the nice part when you go up to it is going to be your TSB's Technical Service Bulletin. Technical Service Bulletin.
Back up.
Okay. The Technical Service Bulletin, if you can move this thing up a bit, can we do that? Yes, we can. My finger worked well today. So if we have a TSB and it looks like there's a mark there.
No.
Okay.
So we didn't find any test
results.
results.
So we didn't find anything. But if you had a TSB and it said it needed reprogramming or something else, that is a great place to start. Because if you didn't go there, Pete, we could have a big problem here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to go back to this one 1 second. Look at the spike here in this one. What is that associated with? It says here, they replace the variable valve timing control valve. Okay, so the most common by a bunch
Yes.
was the control valve. But as we said right from the very beginning, this is a resource. What did we say in the beginning? That a trained tech will use that information and then confirm it by performing the appropriate tests. Test the guess.
Yeah.
That might be the very first thing I'm going to look at, because
Definitely.
there's been so many instances of that being a problem with this vehicle. Okay, this vehicle has 105,000 miles, I believe, on it. Look when this problem is happening. Right when it starts crossing that 100,000 mile mark.
Yeah. And don't forget oil, right oil level, and the right grade of oil. This car looks like it came in with clean oil in it, because we did test that.
Yeah. And this goes back to, and we'll get into that when we move over to the other side here for a minute, of, again, researching the system, knowing how the system functions, right? It relies on a clean oil supply passing through this valve to the actuator mechanism in order to make this system work. All right, so what's some of the fewer items on there? We'll replace the solenoid valve. We replace the valve cover gasket. Interesting. Replace the variable valve timing actuator on the camshaft. Some had to reprogram the PCM, and some actually had to replace the engine assembly to fix that. That had to be a really sludge motor there.
Pretty sludge.
All right, but the most common is that actuator. We talked about the TSBs. Now here's something pretty neat. It can be very helpful if you've ever looked at enhanced data on a factory scan tool. There's literally hundreds of PIDs. And not all of them are related necessarily to the system that we're trying to test. This feature actually takes the codes that are stored or that you're diagnosing, in this case the 1009, and will populate the scan tool data PIDs with the most common related to that system. So you may want to take a look at that.
And you may see a desired angle of or degree on the actuator. So desired usually means that's where you should be in that ballpark. And they highlight them in red when there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
You get a little check mark or flag.
Next item on the list under the intelligent diagnostics, functional tests and research procedures, code-specific tests and procedures. We can check into that and see what that has to tell us. Okay, we have functional tests. There are no particular functional tests for that code, which tells us that there's no way to actuate the valve through the tool. However, if we look at the functional tests, just take a peek inside there. Yeah, we know it's going to do what it's going to do. We do have all these functional tests that are available to us, right? And down here near the bottom, we have a VTC test. So there's a test in here, but what this test is for is to determine whether there's a fault or not. So if there's already a fault stored, this test won't run. Then we do have one for the VTEC system, but that's really going to apply to what we're doing here today. So we'll back out of there, go back to our home screen. The next, really great. Anyone watching have a Vantage or Vantage Pro and looked at those guided tests in that tool? Well, this is a Vantage on steroids, because here you've got the component tests, and what this does is it tells you how to test that component. Let's go down here to the VTEC solenoid. Tells us component information, gives us a pinout for the connector.
And that's important. The pinout for the connector is going to tell us what we have, the color of the wire, what has power, right?
Yep. Also gives us how it works. So the ECM controls the solenoid and the oil control valve by calculating a signal from the selected sensors to optimize power output, lower emissions, and fuel consumption. Changing the duty signal to the oil control valve, the ECM PCM can adjust the intake cam phase. If a malfunction occurs, the VTC is disabled and valve timing is fixed at a fully retarded position. So now we know what things to look for. We know where the connector pinouts are. We know what the wires do. Tells us where the location is. So that's the component information. What else got to tell us? Well, here's a resistance test. It's going to tell us where to connect our tool. And if we want to go perform that test, well, I can even pull the meter up. We're not going to worry about calibrating the probe for the sake of our example. Whoops, excuse me. No. So now I've got the meter test results right on the same screen. so I can see what they are and compare them to what they told me they should
with
be.
the specification and the temperature.
Yeah.
So that's pretty neat.
We can also go back and check the out of range no signal test. This is basically a voltage drop test of the other tool. And again, we can pull the meter up to do it. Now this what makes it nice is this has the multimeter built in and a 2-channel scope built in. Now, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to use the information from this, and we went ahead for the sake of time. We've already removed the actuator from the vehicle, so we can see if we can hold that up and keep it all together. We'll take that off right now.
Got that off there. So here is the solenoid.
Yep.
Okay. And all solenoids have 2 wires. We have put special little connectors in here.
Let me get that off just like there. Okay.
We are going to power it up. A little oil leaking out on us. That's what got me before.
We'll make sure they get a good shot of that solenoid, and I'll hit it.
Yep. Okay. First thing, we have continuity. And let me maybe turn that. Does that help you, Doreen, that way?
If you can see that all right.
My hand may be behind it. So there's the solenoid.
See if you can get it even close as you can get it. We need to pull that up.
Yeah, that's good.
There you go. Okay, so there we got a good close of it. Now, what we're going to do is by going to our service information system, ProDemand, we know that if we supply power and ground to the solenoid, it should open. And it even gives us a spec on the minimum that it should open. So we'll just go ahead and try that. And we can see it's opening.
Let's see if we can see it on the camera. Do that again. Oh, yeah. Hang on. I guess got to turn it the other way. Try that again. Look right there. Which way do I have to turn that? It's like looking at the camera is tough. It's bad. Okay, so right there you go. You can see the actuator moving up and down.
Now we do repeat tests. If we do this several times to see if there might be a problem with the coil heating up.
I would say about 6 times minimal is what you should do. Don't leave it on because this is a duty cycle solenoid. And then if we went to the scope,
before you move,
yep,
I'm going to set this up for you.
We're going to actually see what the current drawer is. Now, if you guys have been watching Pete and I for a while, I always say based off specification on what the current flow should be, because current does work. So we don't want this thing to pull more than 1.2 amps, that's 1200 milliamps for more than 6 milliseconds. So we got to power it up and down real quick. We're going to zero it next to our lead.
Yeah, and what we want to make a point here too is, like, I think you just pointed out, correct me if I'm wrong, you gave them the limit on average that might cause damage to the computer, right?
Correct.
So,
and we got to zero that puppy.
So we're going to zero it out.
There we go.
All right, and
then we're going to go around. Yeah, you can go around that wire if you want. And then you're going to be the
guinea pig.
The clicker man.
See if I can stay out of the way. And let's see what kind of current we're pulling here.
So there's 1, 1, 1, 5, 0, 1 amp, 1, 4. So this thing here, and you got to remember, we are not going super fast because the computer is going to go way faster than when Pete is pressing the button on putting power and ground on, but we're not way over, okay? We're not way over the limit. If we were, let's say, more than that 1.2, like 1.8, then we got to worry, okay? So this solenoid is operating, which we got a code for it not operating, okay? Didn't say it was a circuit issue or pulling too much current. So most likely this solenoid is good, and we may go back to that code for the computer.
Yeah. And here's a couple other things we can point out. You did your homework, didn't you? We read up on this system. We know that this valve is just allowing oil under pressure through it. But what is the quality of the oil? Is it the correct viscosity? Is it being changed the way it should?
Right. And we have no clue. Is it the right oil filtered in there as well?
Yeah.
We didn't do this. This came from another shop with the oil changed already.
Exactly. And that's one clue. It's got a nice fresh oil change on it. So we don't know if they were trying to do that as a fix. That may be taking some of the evidence away from us, but it's something, again, as detectives, we're logging that information as part of our list.
And we got to ask that customer, because they may have gone for that 1995 oil change. Right. Okay.
They got 10W30 in it.
Yeah. And it's the wrong. And believe it or not, this is no lie. We have had a lot of that. You've seen the articles I've written. It's a biggie. So that's the first thing we're going to ask this lady.
Absolutely.
Monday morning.
Another thing we can look at is we take a close look at the screens that are on this tool or on this valve. They're pretty clean.
Yeah,
they're not a bad indication.
Right. There's not a lot of debris. And we've pulled some out that had ungodly debris on them.
Sure. Sure. And again, as you do your homework, go back to Pro Demand and read up on the test procedures, some of the common fixes, what these techs do, what were their tips. Another thing that we learned that we didn't pick up just based on the scan tools information is that, hey, guess what? There's a screen located before you get to the solenoid. It's behind the serpentine belt tensioner. So you have to remove the belt and the tensioner and then an access cover to inspect that screen. That would be worthwhile to see what kind of, if that's clogged or restricted and preventing the right oil flow to get through. And then we know how the system works. It's built on oil pressure is fed through the actuator, which then sends it on, through the solenoid, then onto the actuator. So
the VVT setup.
So maybe we need to pull the valve cover. Maybe we need to check the condition of the actuator. Is it moving freely or is it stuck in position? We can also put this back together and checking those functional data PIDs. We can take it for a test drive while we're monitoring those PIDs. Does that move like it's supposed to, or is it stuck in one position? Well, we know it's not the solenoid. It seems to be working just fine. So we may have a problem with the actuator. And then, as you aptly pointed out, what was that one we found? Because we did the full system scan, we saw that ECM code. It might have been in the ABS system, but it could be a problem with the ECM.
Could be.
Yeah, and we did some homework on that. 2 steps to find out on that code is to set a check to see if it resets the code after you clear it. And if it does, then there may be they want you to reprogram it,
right?
Flash it with the latest updates. And if that doesn't do it, well, guess what? Got to put a new ECM in it.
But, a couple of things I'm going to ask this particular vehicle owner is, one, how frequently did they change their oil in the past? Now, why?
Sure.
No, if you come over and look at the car, one of the things here is we see it has the new Honda dipstick, okay, that usually breaks when people don't really do a lot of maintenance on it, okay? It looks like it's been cleaned down, like someone tried to do something on it. So if they say, well, I really didn't change my oil all that much, well, maybe that screen is where I'm going next, okay? I'm going to look at that. And that's little clues of what you want to ask them. Did this just happen before the oil change, or did they change the oil trying to fix this problem?
Oh, you mean at step 1 we talked about, where you're gathering all your evidence?
All your evidence.
Yeah.
All your evidence.
Yeah.
And, running this thing and testing it, and again, seeing if we have a problem, and looking at, hey, is this engine changing? Now we could go into the scan tool and look at timing changes. Does the VVT actually make any adjustment? Okay, because if it doesn't, we got a problem. It's either no oil going to it, wrong oil, okay? And there's one I wrote about on a Honda with a P1259. I still remember this stuff in my head. The guy put in 530 rather than 520 on that particular Honda CRV. And the oil was perfect. These people had a rough running motor. So these are things that can really mess you up. SnapOn also has on there, Pete, did we take a screenshot of the PIDs that were highlighted? I forgot.
I think so. In fact, if you want, let's take a look at that first. If I can get the lovely Miss Doreen to kind of look at this screen for a moment. And I want to go back to this because some great information that G has for you on this, what's on this screen. But let's take a look first at what I've got for my customer. That's what we stored in the Altus cloud. And this is the pre-scan report that I can keep for my records, and I can share with my customer, showing what we've got here. We've got the permanent codes in the engine. We've got the tire pressure monitoring system, the anti-lock brakes, and we scroll it down. You can see that it's telling us, what that is, what the codes are.
And readiness monitors tire pressure and your VIN number, so it's not like it's off someone else's car, which is super important.
So I just want to see that because you have that, and then when we're done, we're going to do the post scan.
Correct.
To make sure that our repair is verified, and we have a record of that as well.
There's a question here about the ABS code. Did you get info on that?
The ABS code, did we get info on the ABS code?
I don't know if I have a screenshot of it or not, but it's the ABS code. The definition was an ECM malfunction. Typically, that's the kind of code that tells you that something went south inside the ECM itself. And basically, the repair process outlined in the service information, both on the SureTrack and in the information itself, the OEM information itself, was to clear the code, see if it resets. If it does, you can try to flash the ECM with the latest software, make sure it's up to date. Failing that, they say put in a substitute ECM and see if it corrects the problem. Of course, we're not a dealer, so it's kind of hard for us to do. Pretty much, the next step, and that's, again, back to our TCM fella in the beginning. If that was the case, I think the first thing that I would do is check the power and grounds to the ECM.
Very important.
Before I pull the trigger on it. Because again, if it can't get the right power, clean power supply, good ground, like any other electrical component, it's not going to work properly. So we're going to need to make sure that's correct.
And especially on these Asian vehicles, being Honda, grounds do corrode. It is a big problem.
Let's see if I have that PID list.
So these are all screenshots that were saved right on the tool that go to the cloud, and you can put this on any computer. You just need the software that you get right from SnapOn.
Let's see if that might be it.
That's
this is what they populated for the for this particular code. Generally, we're looking at the VTC status. I did not get into the details of this, and I admit that I'm not 100% up with the system as far as the rocker arm control and solenoid valves go. But remember, we have an oil control valve in the system, so it may be related to that. Mill status, of course, is in there. But we can see the VTC, is it on? Is it off?
Right. Yeah. Very important.
All right. So that's just one example there. And I'm going to get back out of that so that we can cover this.
And do we have any other questions? So
yeah,
if there's no questions where I'm showing you this, this is the SnapOn gas analyzer that I just refreshed the data. This is the actual tool. And you can see we're looking at HCCO, or it's better to look right up here. Yeah. Now, obviously, the motor's not running, but when it is running, we can see right away, Pete, if we have a problem. Because right away on a car, this particular year was what year?
2012.
2012. So at 2012, one of the big things I'm going to look at is oxygen content. So the oxygen content, if I look here at O2, I want to see that very low. Right now, my oxygen content, that green line, is about 20% because the engine is not running.
And how much oxygen is there in the atmosphere?
19 to 21%.
Oh, I wonder where the 20%.
So we're about there. We're breathing at least. But when the engine's running, what I would like is that oxygen down less than 0.5%.
Yeah.
If it is higher than that, then I know I got a misfire. Because the suck, squeeze, bang, blow, intake, compression, power, exhaust is nothing more than an air pump. But it has to be an efficient air pump. Now, CO2 over here, which we won't have any because it's not running, I would like to see this car at about 14 and a half minimum. That would tell me it's running good. Unfortunately, we took the solenoid out, but with the engine not running right, we would be maybe 12 or 13. Now, of course, you do have your NOx is low at idle, so that would be only if you took this on the road. This is portable, so I can take this with me on the road and just secure the hose so it doesn't go flying out, okay? I can see hydrocarbons at idle, parts per million, and I really wouldn't want to see more than 100 or so, and even that's a lot, because There's a difference pre-cat, in other words, before the catalytic converter.
Let me say.
The old days, we used to use the T handles with the fuel distributor. That fuel distributor, we would be able to turn it. And then, of course, there is CO, carbon monoxide, the stuff that'll kill you, okay? So that should also be very low. A high reading would indicate we're rich.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember it did say timing could be retarded? If timing is retarded, well, what's that going to do? It's going to make it rich, okay? So we need to be aware that gas readings could really make our job easier if we utilize it.
And that's a big reason I wanted you to share some of these pointers, G, is because it didn't really, because of how it didn't really fall into the smoothness. But I want to make sure we hit this for one very good reason. I was told a while back that, I don't need a scope because I got the good scan tool. Well, you know what? In these systems, more and more you guys and gals are figuring out that, oh, yeah, you do, because there's some things you can't test any other way. Well, back in the old days, we used to use 5-gas quite a bit for troubleshooting, and now those days are coming back.
Yes, I'm glad to see they came out with this because people weren't using it for years.
Yeah, and it's not just for emissions. Back in the days we had, for those who had those types of tests, but we talked earlier about testing techniques to help you eliminate suspects. Well, if you're dealing with fuel trim codes, if you're dealing with catalytic converter codes, if you're dealing with misfire codes, hell, if you have a car that won't start, I can find out real quick what's missing by sticking the probe up the tailpipe. If I have a car that won't start and I crank it over and I see a ton of HC on the meter, well, I know it's got gas.
That's correct.
Right?
You start getting 20,000 parts per million plus, you got fuel. It's not looking down the carburetor anymore. Right.
And there's a lot of these GDI systems, there's no little Schrader valve to pop to see if there's anything there.
And how about the customer complaining it smells in their car? Maybe fumes. You could put the probe in there. The other thing is use your SnapOn smoke machine and use this with a short hose that I have right down in our drawer down here. See this little short hose? Take this big hose probe off. We go like this under the car with CO2. If we see a leak, because smoke turned into oil, and what's the job of the charcoal canister? To actually trap hydrocarbon vapors. The smoke is a vapor, so maybe I don't see it, but I could go down the car with this in my hand and find the CO2 that is leaking.
Yeah.
So this is good. And then look at this. I can print it out and give my customer a report of their car.
Yeah.
Now, again, since we were in emission state up here years back with a gas analyzer, we're so used to using it. A lot of guys that were not used to this, I remember being in Hawaii, down your way in Florida when they didn't have a test. They go, I don't need that. That's for an inspection program. This is to help you diagnose a car, to put everything that scan tool gave us, a meter gives you, this is going to gap that hole.
Yeah. The
hole that is there, this can take that out.
Yeah.
And do a real good job for you. So, there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good information, that we went over tonight. The thermal imager could be helpful. All these tools that you need today to be a master diagnostician, not a parts changer.
Right.
And that changes it big time.
And I'm going to move back over this way as we wind down towards the conclusion of tonight's time together. Because I wanted to share that one of the things that G was sharing again with the 5-gas analyzer, this is what we talked about at the very, very beginning, where everybody's suspect. And we need tests that helps us eliminate large groups of suspects at a time. The more testing techniques you know, the more you can apply the one you need for a given situation. And the 5-gas analyzer is just an example of that. The scope, all the different testing techniques from relative compression testing all the way up to looking at fuel injector voltage and current patterns, fuel pumps, in-cylinder pressure tests that a few years back nobody even knew what we were talking about. Yep. These are all examples of tests that can help you both eliminate a bunch and confirm the culprit. So any questions?
Let us know.
I don't leave yet. Got some important stuff for you. Okay, first thing I'm going to ask is that while we're going through these last few slides, last bits of information, which is some really good stuff, so hang in there. If you think what we had tonight, if it was worth your time, if you felt that it was valuable time, How about putting a Y in the chat window for us?
Come on, get that finger going. Why, if it was good?
If
And
you
if
don't
you
think
didn't
it
like it.
was, you thought you wasted your time, well, you're probably off by now. But if you're still around, put an N in there for us. All right.
So why, if it's good, and if it didn't help you?
Well, again, while you're doing that, big thank you to SnapOn for bringing us here tonight, allowing us to do this for you. Find out more about the Triton 10 and other diagnostic tools has at diagnostics.snapon.com.
And again, a real special thanks to SnapOn, because, Pete, when people could view stuff for free, not everyone, we wrenched for years. We know a lot of technicians don't make a lot of money. So you got to be grateful to the people who sponsor this type of stuff.
Right. And again, not sounding modest, but if you guys who've known us for a while know that is why I fly up here. That is why G does what he does with the TST group. Of course, and Pierre and Doreen and the rest of the members that bring these TST events possible. We do it because we sincerely want to help you make your life easier in the bay. Because if you can do things more efficiently, if you can find and isolate that repair more quickly, if you don't have to deal with the comebacks because your previous method didn't work for you, all of this is going to do one thing: put more of the green in your pocket, and it'll give you a chance to take better care of yourself and your family. That's it for me. That's
and remember, a lot of people go, "Oh, well, it cost me money to buy this equipment." You can't diagnose today's car with going, "Oh, I could hear everything."
Right.
Yes, you got those important tools that God gave us, but guess what? You need the right equipment.
Yeah.
You can't see what a thermal imager can see, or a gas analyzer can sense, a scope can do, or a meter, or a scan tool.
Right.
So do that.
Yeah.
A big plug here for PAVE and SnapOn. You'll see Jason there. I forgot Jason's last name, but I was his proctor last year on PAVE. PAVE is an event that is joined together by all of these non-for-profit groups. And this date, the December 2nd to the 5th, 2021, this is online only. You'll have some great instructors. Save the date. If you sign up early, it's $199. Who is this for? Technicians, owners, managers, shop advisors, collision people. There are a whole bunch of instructors on this thing from loads of different people. Pop into the next one. Now, you get to see us live. This is going to be live on car, sponsored by Dorman Products at the Dorman Training Center in PA. Due to COVID, most of it will be virtual. We will try to work with some groups down there, like the ASA PA, the Super Saturday guys. There'll be myself, Pete Meyer, our buddy Swede Owen, and this will be on Saturday, September 18th, a full day from 8 to 5. There'll also be a tour through Dorman, so some of you people that think they are not up to speed, you'll change your mind when you see what they're going to show you. Morning, Pete and I will be doing on vehicle from 8 to 12. And yes, there's SnapOn there. They got a nice, rather than my black cart over there that I have, they have a beautiful orange one and one black one. So we'll be using some SnapOn stuff there. We'll be doing a whole bunch of things on LabScope. And then in the afternoon, real diagnostic tips and tricks live on the vehicle. So these tips and tricks will be going through scan data, gas analysis, whole bunch of stuff on the vehicle. And both Pete and I, and of course, Swede will be helping us. Then we have Sunday. Sunday, Swede is the master. We'll be helping him. I know Swede for years. Heavy duty air brakes. This will cover, it'll be rather than a vehicle, which is hard to see under, Swede has a big board that would probably take most of the bay, about the size of a car, if not more. And it's all up there where you can see the treadle valve, you can see the wet tanks, you can see the brakes, the S-cams, everything that he will go over to actually let you get a good understanding for brakes. So for the heavy duty guys, I know we had guys contact us already. And is it going to be recorded and all that? And the answer would be yes. And Pierre is saying he has a question or a comment or something.
There was this came up a few times. Some people had trouble getting their handouts with the link. So maybe, Pete, you can tell them how they can get the handouts.
Yes, I will. Absolutely. In fact, just a second, I'll pull that back up again for you. Just make plans now, because two of us will be back here in November with our next webcast. doing what we did today. If you did get a chance to join us on the 18th, all those tests we talked about, helping you isolate between the many and the few, we'll have a lot more time to show you that on the live card and how that works.
Right.
Here's the answer you want. If you had a problem getting your handout, again, I apologize if there was an issue with that. Here's our email addresses. Send it to me, the first one up there. So write that down. I'm going to give you a minute so you can write that down.
And that way you can get that handout and
yeah, I will make sure that you get it. All right. All right. So as always, we know you have a lot of better things that you can do on a Saturday night. We are both thankful that you chose to spend your time with us. We hope that you found it worth your time. And thank you so much for coming out tonight. So on behalf of Motor Age, TST, have a great evening. We'll see you in November.
You got it. November. Don't forget. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.